2 days away from the start of the NCAA tournament. So that means we need two states of the program on this State of the Program Tuesday episode on the Locked On Big Ten podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Locked On Big Ten podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Ben Stevens. It is Tuesday, March 16th, and on this episode, we will discuss the Iowa Hawkeyes, the 2 seed in the West region, and the number 9 seed in the South region, the Wisconsin Badgers. And for this 2 State of the Program episode, we go with 2 great members of the Locked On Podcast Network's college channel and Big Ten specific teams. And we start with Andrew Wade, the host of Locked On Hawkeyes. Asher Lowe, the host of Locked On Badgers, will come up next. But Andrew Wade, great to have you here. Anything you want to say to Asher, who will be here later in the episode, that he will hear and then respond to, hopefully on Twitter later in the day?
I'm just so pumped for that Wisconsin game. I'm going to lay so much money on North Carolina. I could not love that draw more for North Carolina. I have a ton of Tar Heel fans, and I've been to a couple of games, just a ton of Tar Heel friends. I have a bunch of gear for them and stuff. So I guess I'm a kind of a solo rooter or a silent rooter for the Tar Heels. And the fact that they get Wisconsin, I love it. So very pumped to watch that game.
And we will discuss with Asher Lowe later why that matchup for the Wisconsin Badgers is not so much a favorable one in the opening round of the NCAA tournament. Before we dive into Iowa and what their path looks like for the Big Dance, first we have to start with what was a reckoning day in the Big Ten Conference when it came to coaching positions across the league. First, the firings or parting of ways, however you want to describe it. The biggest one, Indiana letting go of Archie Miller, paying that over $10 million buyout, which was done by a generous donor, a generous booster, paid the buyout. Archie Miller's time after 4 seasons in Bloomington has come to an end. Then Minnesota let go of Richard Pitino. His time at the helm of the Gophers also coming to an end. He had a much smaller buyout. So some of the names you might hear around that coaching search for Indiana: Brad Stevens, the head coach of the Boston Celtics, seems unlikely. Nate Oates, the head coach of Alabama, seems unlikely. Steve Alford, the Indiana great, who is now the head coach at Nevada, seems unlikely. But there are some other names, and Scott Dolson, the Indiana AD, said in his press conference on Monday following the firing of Archie Miller, he is pretty set on a certain couple of candidates. He is not hiring a search firm to help him with the search. A replacement for Minnesota, as our good friend Daniel House, one of the smartest minds in the Big Ten Conference, has let me know. Brian Dutcher, the head coach currently at San Diego State, who is a 6th seed in the NCAA tournament, and possibly, just possibly, Eric Musselman, the Muss Bus, who is the head coach at Arkansas, with all of his familial ties to the Minnesota program as well. We also had some good news in the coaching ranks on Monday. Penn State hiring Purdue assistant coach Micah Shrewsbury, the greatest name you could possibly say. I'm so happy he's staying in the Big Ten Conference because Micah Shrewsbury is just a ton of fun to say. The Purdue assistant will take over the reins at Penn State. The interim head coach Jim Ferry will not be promoted to that head coaching job. Micah Shrewsbury coached under Brad Stevens at Butler and a little bit with the Boston Celtics as well, under Matt Painter in this year at Purdue, and has been the guy, really, Andrew, that has been drawing up some of the offensive schemes that has allowed Purdue to be a 4 seed in the South region of this NCAA tournament. And finally, in your neck of the woods, Fran McCaffrey getting a coaching extension to stay in Iowa City through the end of the 2027-2028 season. Your thoughts on all of it, if you want to begin with Fran, I understand.
I'll start with Indiana. First off, I love Mark Cuban. I feel like he might be that silent booster.
That donor? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that donor. Very, very silently, right? Archie Miller getting canned. It makes sense, dude. Indiana has way too much history to be as poor as they have been. Now, they play well against some teams. Obviously, Iowa being on the victim side of that as well, losing 2 games to Indiana. They had strong games at times, but they have good players. They're not able to figure it out. Archie Miller needs to go. I think they can get a lot of different guys in there who can build that program back up to what the glory days previously were. Minnesota, I thought was a bit interesting. They had some issues down the stretch. I mean, losing Liam Robbins is a huge loss. I think not losing Liam Robbins, they probably could have made the tournament. They probably could have got in there. Is Rick Pitino fired at that point? I don't know. Minnesota, though, has a lot of strong talent in the state. And so I think anyone they hire needs to have a good connection to the state of Minnesota, because there's a lot of talent coming out of there that is not going to Minnesota. Minnesota used to have a very good basketball program, and it's tough building a program now in the Big Ten. So if they can do that, if they can find a guy who has those ties in state, that'll be huge for them. Penn State, anytime you can steal someone from a conference rival, that is huge. And Purdue is a very tough out. They were not a team that was expected to be that good this year, and they are very strong. So that is a big hire for Penn State. Now, going to Fran McCaffrey, I love it. I think it's a perfect time situation. I did say coming into the season, I've been kind of on the fence at times, right? I think sometimes you gotta look at what Fran does and say, man, we were ranked 5th coming into the season. We struggled at times we haven't really beat a major team. There are concerns there. This might be the best team Iowa's had in 30 years, and yet you see fault in that team. But you also got to look at it and say, this is the best Iowa's had in 30 years, and there's a reason why, and it's Fran McCaffrey. And every player that I talk to absolutely loves Fran McCaffrey. They go to bat for Fran McCaffrey. Yes, he's not getting a lot of 5-star guys. He's not getting any 5-star guys. He's not getting a lot of 4-star guys unless they live 10 miles away from Iowa City. And even the 3-star guys he gets are not typically hyped up recruits, except for no, actually, no. They're all those guys are 4-stars. Yeah, I can't think of it. Like Luka Garza was a very quiet 4-star. Patrick McCaffrey is his son. Joe Wieskamp grew up 30 minutes away. I mean, you look, the list goes on and on. There's not a lot of big name guys that have come to Iowa outside of maybe Tyler Cook that weren't either from the state of Iowa or Fran wasn't the first one in on. So what Fran has done with this program is really impressive. And I think what he's doing to build it up to continue and sustain that success is going to be huge. That deep bench is going to be very strong going forward. Tony Perkins got big time minutes through the course of the end of the season. I really liked what he brought defensively, and he was not afraid to take the ball to the hoop and do it in a controlled manner, which is something we're not seeing from Joe Toussaint as much, but still a very talented guy himself. Josh Ogundele put up a great 45 seconds against Kofi Coburn. That guy couldn't get off the bench the entire season, and Fran puts him in against freaking Illinois and Kofi Coburn, and he did what he needed to do. So basically my whole point is I love the extension. I think it's well-timed. I'm excited to see what Iowa does this upcoming couple of weeks, but great extension for Iowa and Fran McCaffrey.
So now on this State of the Program episode, let's look ahead to this year's NCAA Tournament, the 2021 Big Dance. We have the bracket, and Iowa is a huge component of that. The number 2 seed in the West region, where the top overall seed, Gonzaga, finds themselves as well. Before we look at Iowa's path, I just want to get your thoughts on where the Hawkeyes stand at the moment. They are 2nd in the country in offensive efficiency, in the defense, which has drastically improved over this past month. Now up to 50th, as KenPom sees it, in those defensive efficiency rankings. How do you feel about Iowa heading into the Big Dance?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to be negative because they just lost to Illinois by, double digits. But if you look at that game, they actually played pretty strong defense. Kofi had a good day. Kofi deserved his. He got his. They were feeding him. It seemed like that was part of their game plan. They did a fantastic job there. But overall, I thought Iowa actually played pretty strong defense. What hurt them was a little bit of carelessness with the ball. Illinois is a very physical and grabby team. And with some officials, it might be a little bit too much grabbing. With Big Ten officials, it's okay when it's Illinois, but I'm not going to get into that. They would have lost that game regardless, right? They would have lost that game regardless, not taking that away from Illinois, but definitely a very physical perimeter defense from Illinois, and they took advantage of that from Iowa, got a couple steals and got a couple breakaway dunks. That's the difference in that game, in my opinion. Iowa clawed back. They tried to get back. Illinois is playing the best basketball in the nation right now. You can't take that away from them, in my opinion. Now, going to what Iowa brings to the table defensively, again, I think Illinois was a big test for me. I was very curious how they could handle that. Now, they struggled a little bit in transition, but I would say that it was less Iowa just being normal Iowa struggling in transition and more the players letting the officials get to them, and that they thought they were getting fouls and then complaining and allowing Iowa to just go down the court like he normally does. They need to be able to be on the game or in the game at that point and know Iowa's going to try to press the ball at all times. They weren't able to do that. They got out in transition. They scored. But again, that is one of the best transition basketball teams in the country. You're not going to get that in a lot of games. For me, I actually felt like this draw was about the best draw Iowa could have possibly gotten. And I am so happy about it. Yes, they could lose at any point in that time. Anyone could lose any game in March Madness. That's why it's March Madness. They could lose to the Antelopes, right? You could make an argument that Grand Canyon could beat Iowa, but I can also make a very strong argument that Iowa could make the Final Four. And I think if you can do that, if you feel pretty confident that in every single game you have more pros than cons going into that game, you have to feel confident about this team, the confidence they have coming into this tournament, and how they've been playing as of late. Even when things aren't working for them, they're still in these games. And when you look at their losses outside of Indiana, they lose to Illinois twice, Ohio State, Michigan, Gonzaga. They blew a game against Minnesota. All right, whatever. They were. I'm not going to count that as a loss. That was just crap. Yeah, but that was all number 1 teams except for Ohio State. I mean, this is a good team. This is still a top 10 team, and I think they should have a pretty clear path to the Final Four.
Speaking with Andrew Wade, the host of Locked On Hawkeyes, a lot of people, Andrew, have made that same case for Gonzaga's portion of that bracket, that they drew a very favorable West region, and you can make the same case then for the Iowa Hawkeyes, the number 2 seed in that region. Before we dive into the matchup against Grand Canyon University, let's get a status update. To the best of your knowledge, the health of Joe Wieskamp and CJ Frederick, who have been dealing with some nagging leg injuries throughout this home stretch of the season. How healthy are they, and how productive do you think they can be in the NCAA tournament?
Yeah, I mean, CJ Frederick looks good to go. I have no issues with CJ's health, especially with the plantar fasciitis. The fact that he's been able to play all those games and be able to do it back to back, I have no concerns with CJ's health. Fran mentioned that he actually thought about sitting out CJ and Joe during the Big Ten tournament, which to me speaks volumes about how he thought about the Big Ten tournament. It wasn't as big of a concern to him. He knew they were going to probably get that 2 seed, and he probably felt like they could beat Wisconsin without those guys. CJ is just generally an injury-prone guy, and I hate that label because I think it can be derogatory or negative in a sense, but the dude just gets these freak injuries. So if you can avoid that as much as possible, you should. Right now, he seems healthy. Joe, I thought, struggled a little bit against Wisconsin, didn't look 100% healthy, but he played well enough to get the job done. And against Illinois, he started off pretty hot. His shot's always going to fall, in my opinion, as long as he can get some open looks, which is a pretty obvious thing to say, right? If you score enough points, you're going to win the game. But Joe Wieskamp is able to make those open looks happen a couple of times against Illinois. So that gives me some hope for him, and giving him an extra week of rest, I think, is huge. Now, losing to Illinois sucked, but that gives Iowa one less game they have to play. That gives them an extra day of rest they have. And I think, again, all that matters is the NCAA tournament. So to me, they are healthy. They're ready to go. And this team is about as healthy as you're going to be without Jack Nungy.
So the 2-15 matchup in the West region, the number 2 seed, the Iowa Hawkeyes, getting the number 15 seed, GCU, Grand Canyon University. The Lopes, or the Antelopes, Bryce Drew, the head coach there in his first year, has done a marvelous job bringing GCU to the NCAA tournament. 14-6 against Division I opponents in this college basketball slate. The WAC champions, the Western Athletic Conference champions. What do you see in this game against GCU? How confident are you that Iowa wins and advances to the round of 32?
99% confident Iowa wins and advances. I think that's obvious. Anytime you're playing a 15 seed, if you don't feel that confident, then you probably shouldn't be a 2 seed. I think when people look at this matchup, they keep bringing up the Twin Towers of Grand Canyon, right? You have a 6'10" forward and you have a 7 foot, 270-pound center. And people are like, oh my gosh, how is Luka going to handle that? Did you forget about the Big Ten schedule? Did you forget about Kofi Coburn and Travion Williams and Liam Robbins and Trace Jack? I mean, I can go on and on. There are almost every team in the Big Ten outside of Ohio State, Nebraska, Penn State has.
Penn State's got John Harrah. He's a big guy. He's going to bang with you.
That's fair. Maybe 2 teams. There are 2 or 3 teams in the Big Ten where I could honestly say, like, yeah, you don't have a center that can even hang in the game with Luka Garza. So to me, yeah, the Twin Towers are scary, especially from a depth perspective. If Iowa, if Luka Garza, for whatever reason, gets in foul trouble, that's a bit concerning. But what we saw against Illinois was Josh Ogundele playing against Kofi Coburn. And if he can back down Kofi, and Josh is a big boy. I mean, he is a very big kid. Part of his issue was the fact that he wasn't in shape. I get it. Very big kid. He can handle those guys down low. And I also trust the athleticism of Keegan Murray to also be able to, yes, he might not be able to handle it from a height perspective, but he can handle it from a speed and athleticism perspective. And I think they shouldn't have any problem with them. When you look at some of their games against the big time teams, what really sets these big teams apart from Grand Canyon is the perimeter play. And I would say Iowa has superior perimeter play compared to Grand Canyon. And that should be the difference in this game. But Luka Garza, I would say, is probably looking at these guys and saying, yeah, you're big, but you are nothing like I face in the Big Ten. And I'm so freaking thankful to not play in the Big Ten. Thank God. Give me someone from the WAC. Give me someone that I can take over and dominate a game. So that does not concern me at all.
Andrew Wade, you are a betting man. Iowa opened up as a 16-point favorite. Do you think they have enough to cover that large margin?
I'm going to probably bet on Iowa.
Yeah, you have to. Come on.
I think Iowa's going to come out incredibly motivated. They have taught, and that, again, obvious things, right? But this team, motivation is a big thing. You look at where they seem to kind of dip at times. They lost that first game to Indiana. They were on a hot streak. Indiana was not a very good team, and they came out and got embarrassed by Indiana. this is a team that realizes that the tournament is a big deal and it doesn't matter who you're playing, but you need to take this game seriously. I think they want to get out to a big lead. They want to get the game over with so they can get their starters on the bench, unlike Illinois, who likes to play their starters deep into the game despite the possibility of injury concerns and just to pad stats for Io and Kofi. But they want to get their starters out of the game, and I think Iowa's bench players can also take over Grand Canyon. So to me, 16 and a half points, I'm going to be betting on that without a doubt, also just because I haven't bet in like 3 weeks, so I'm pretty itching right now, and I'm ready to go. So let's roll.
Can you leave Illinois out of it? You salty Iowa fan, just leave them out of it.
Dude, I don't hate the Illinois team at all, to be fair. Actually, I take that back. Andre Curbelo is so freaking good.
We're running long regardless. I can't let you go up on your soapbox about the Illinois Fighting Illini. I love you, but I can't let you do it.
Can I get 30 seconds?
15, go.
Andre Curbelo is fantastic, but I hate playing against him because he's just so passionate. It just pisses me off when he does awesome things. It's what I would look like if I were good at basketball. I hate the Illinois fan base. Without a doubt, the worst fan base in the Big Ten. They're worse than Nebraska football. They are the scum of the Big Ten, but the team is phenomenal, and I'm excited to watch how Illinois basketball represents the Big Ten in the NCAA tournament.
I would also like to further, I do not feel as strongly about the Illinois Fighting Illini fan base. I enjoy you guys. Keep rooting hard for Brad Underwood and his team. Just want to say that on the Locked On Big Ten podcast. Andrew Wade, the host of Locked On Hawkeyes, where I do not think any Illini fans will be listening to your episodes throughout this week, but he will have further previews with a former Iowa Hawkeye basketball player, Bakari Evelyn, getting ready for the NCAA tournament. Andrew Wade, despite your rant about Illinois, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Badgers are our second team up on this State of the Program Tuesday episode, the number 9 seed in the South region. And joining us now to talk all things Wisconsin is the host of Locked On Badgers, Asher Lowe, back on the podcast for the first time in what feels like a long time, because there was a stretch there midway through the college basketball season where I feel like you were on every other week. But now it's been a while, but I'm glad to have you back as we get ready for the big dance, Asher.
Coming back from your home base in Indianapolis at the Big Ten tournament. It was a great week. Being there, seeing a ton of teams, not just Big Ten teams, by the way, teams walking around. Cleveland State was staying at my hotel. It was just like a big March party. It was a big March safe, COVID-19 friendly party. So it was just fun to see that whole city kind of lit up with Final Four stuff here and March Madness decals there. It was fun.
It was a big week for you, not only because you got to watch a lot of great college basketball, but you also had dinner with the athletic director of the Wisconsin Badgers, Barry Alvarez, the Don. How'd that go?
Well, I do want to save the full story for Locked On Badgers, but
Please.
I will say that it was a ton of fun. We were sitting not too far from where Barry's box was. I assume he's double vaccinated because he didn't have much of a care in the world about where he was, and he had probably some sherry in him or whatnot. And he was yelling back and forth to us after every big Wisconsin play, I felt like. At every timeout or something when Wisconsin would go on a run against Penn State, he would do some interesting things. He looked at us and did the Ezekiel Elliott eating celebration when Aleem Ford hit a 3 before a timeout. He was getting really hyped when we were getting into the Wisconsin fight song that was playing. And then eventually in the second half, he called us over to give us food. He asked us, he yelled across the stadium, "Are you hungry? You hungry?" And we came over. He handed us a bunch of broth. He said, "What do you need if you're a Wisconsin guy and you're hungry? You need some brats." And he handed us some brats. He also told us we can give him some to the Indiana fans, not just Wisconsin fans, and his reasoning was that Indiana fans were yelling to fire their coach. Fire Archie was the chant. And, well, Archie is fired now.
Breaking news on this Monday afternoon for a Tuesday show. Archie Miller no longer the head coach at Indiana. Richard Pitino no longer the head coach with Minnesota. Breaking news in this State of the Program episode discussing all things Wisconsin basketball. But Wisconsin basketball is still playing this March, the number 9 seed in the South region. Like I mentioned, they get the opening round matchup against the number 8 seed, the North Carolina Tar Heels. We will dive into that matchup with Asher Lowe in just a moment. But before we get to the big dance, let's look back very quickly. In Wisconsin, end of the year, losing 6 of their last 8 games. Why did that happen, Asher Lowe?
Why didn't it happen? There are a lot of reasons why Wisconsin lost 6 of 8. First thing is they played a lot of really good teams. That's just number one. When you play in the Big Ten, you're going to play a Purdue, you're going to play in Illinois, you're going to play in Iowa. Wisconsin played all those teams. Wisconsin played Illinois and Iowa twice, and then Iowa a third time, obviously, in the Big Ten tournament. So playing great teams down the stretch did not help much at all. And as we know about Wisconsin, they've been able to handle the bottom half of the Big Ten very well, and they've been able to not get a single win against the top 5 teams in the Big Ten as we head into the big dance. So the schedule didn't help, And then rebounding was a huge issue in multiple games. Offensive rebounding, giving up easy chances, second chance points, the offensive stagnation that we've seen all year. You can't have those 5-6 minute droughts that Wisconsin has against all teams they play, but they get away with it against the bottom half of the Big Ten. They don't get away with it against Iowa. They don't get away with it against Illinois. They don't get away with it against Michigan. And you just can't handle a team that's that good when you go into that long of a stretch of poor offense. And then the lack of consistency with almost everybody on the roster has been really alarming this year, outside of Dimitri Trice, who even then has been up and down a little bit, but I feel like he's been at least pretty consistent. Micah Potter's been consistent for the last couple of weeks. Didn't have a great game against Iowa by any means, but I don't think that was all his fault necessarily. The rest of the roster, right? Reavers, Davison, Ford, Johnny Davis, all these guys that have just been so up and down. You don't know what you're going to get from them, especially on the offensive end. And it's hard to win when you have a 5 or 6 minute drought coming in every single game you play on the offensive end, and you just know it's going to happen, and you have to withstand it.
Now looking ahead to the NCAA tournament, Asher Lowe, the host of Locked On Badgers, had said multiple times on this podcast, for Wisconsin to have success in the big dance, it would be very matchup dependent. They draw North Carolina in that opening round of 64 in the 8-9 matchup in the South region. This is a matchup that does not bode well for Wisconsin in your mind, Asher, as you said on our Locked On Live Bracket Mayhem special. What is it about the North Carolina Tar Heels that scares you if you're a Wisconsin fan?
That was a lot of fun, by the way, to watch that Locked On Live special. I tuned in for quite a bit of it, saw a bunch of the different Locked On Now reactions. It was fun to have that as a network, and did see myself on there as well, which was cool. I tuned in for when mine happened to come up, but yeah, I saw some different reactions. I saw some of your takes. I enjoyed that Locked On Live March Madness selection show. This North Carolina team is the best rebounding team in college basketball. They start two bigs, which is really interesting because I think Wisconsin actually matches up best when Potter and Reavers are together against this team, and it's not even close. I mean, Tyler Wall's not guarding Garrison Brooks. It's just not happening. I think you have to start Potter and Reavers, which to me is almost, I'm like gleeful over here being a guy that really wanted to see that a little bit more this year against some different teams. And against some teams, it doesn't make sense, right? Like against the Rutgers, you can't start those guys together. It just wouldn't work. Against an Iowa, you can't really either, unless Keegan Murray, I guess, is starting. And even then, Keegan Murray, I don't really want Reavers on him. So this is the perfect matchup for Wisconsin to go with two bigs. But North Carolina is the best rebounding team in the nation. They average more offensive rebounds than any team in the entire country. They're not a good shooting team. They don't have great guard play. It's a very different Roy Williams team, I feel like, than what you're accustomed to seeing. But they are long, athletic. They are deep, which is something that I think is going to kill Wisconsin. They don't have two bigs. They got four. And Sterling Manley has been a really good factor off the bench in certain games at 6'11", doesn't even start. Walker Kessler, looking at the wrong name. Walker Kessler, 7'1", from Noonan, Georgia, has been a really good factor in multiple games. I watched him come in as a true freshman and actually win some games for them off the bench. Sometimes he's a non-factor, sometimes he wins games for them off the bench. But when you're starting Bacot and Brooks, you're bringing Kessler in off the pine. You're bringing Leaky Black in, who is like just the perfect guy to destroy Wisconsin. 6'8", long. How are our guards going to contend with a guy like that on the defensive end? But the length, athleticism, the rebounding, that's why this is going to be really tough for Wisconsin. They are not a good offensive rebounding team. They are not good at controlling the paint at all. If Iowa can have a block party against the Badgers, I don't want to know what North Carolina can do. On the flip side, I will say this. Their guard play is not as good as it's been in past years, as I opened with. They're not a good shooting team at all. And Wisconsin can get open looks from three against this team. Bacot and Brooks are not guys that necessarily want to live on the perimeter. Especially a guy like Bacot, if you want to stretch the floor, if you want Potter and Reavers to have success, they have to hit those pop threes. It's all going to come down to, can the Wisconsin bigs stretch the floor? Can they make enough jumpers to keep the defense honest? And can the guards knock down shots from the perimeter? Because North Carolina is going to handle the paint, get a ton of rebounds, and be a problem.
Another matchup that might favor the Badgers as well. Wisconsin's second best in the country in terms of turnover percentage. North Carolina 257th. So that could be an area where Wisconsin looks to take advantage. So Asher Lowe, I want to ask one final question of you here. And the idea that the Big Ten has been battle tested all year long, that's probably more evident in Wisconsin than any other team in the league. As we talked about, 0-8 against the top 5 teams in the Big Ten. Do you think that now Wisconsin gets to leave the Big Ten, face an unfamiliar team from the ACC, just a new fresh face? Can that benefit Greg Gard and company at all?
No, but I will say this. No, not really. Not particularly. Not with.
I'm trying to find a silver lining here because this is a terrible matchup. I agree with you.
Listen, if there is one advantage, and it's an advantage we haven't really seen come into play this year, and you said they've been battle tested. They haven't beaten anybody. So who have they? I mean, they haven't beaten anybody. Any of those battles they haven't won. They've lost every single battle. So yeah, they're battle tested, I guess, but they don't have wins in those games. They are, as we've said millions and millions of times, a very old team. Ben, they have a lot of experience. Older than the Chicago Bulls. Very old team. And North Carolina, this North Carolina team, as they have been for a long time now, embracing the one and done era, is a very young team. Like very, very, very young. Garrison Brooks.
In fact, I believe the youngest team with the least amount of experience heading into this year's NCAA tournament field.
So if you want experience to show in a late game situation, I actually like Wisconsin here if this thing is really close late, and that might surprise some Badger fans because Wisconsin has not been good in those situations, but they make free throws better than North Carolina makes free throws. They don't turn the ball over, as you said, even though we saw some turnovers late against Iowa. And they have, I mean, the experience comparison is a joke, right? Yet at the end of the day, North Carolina has the better athletes. They have the better rebounding, and they are going to block a ton of shots in this game. Like I said, Wisconsin has to make threes. It's pretty simple, especially the bigs.
It's not a great matchup for Wisconsin, but it is a game that I think a lot of college basketball fans have circled as one of those best games on Friday in the opening round of 64. It will be played at 7 p.m. Eastern, a tip on CBS inside Mackey Arena, where Wisconsin obviously has some experience in playing in that building. As it is right now, Ken Palm sees Wisconsin winning by 2, 69-67. The Badgers, a 1.5-point underdog, though, according to our friends at betonline.ag. Asher Lowe, the host of Locked On Badgers, giving you all the insight you can need as the Badgers get ready for their run in March. Asher, even though you are hashtag WCC Asher, you still bring the knowledge when it comes to Big Ten, my friend.
UCSB, Sweet 16.